Good morning, everyone.
Good morning, Rabbi.
Good morning.
We are learning Mishnah Shabbos, Perek Yud Beis, chapter 12, Mishnah Aleph, Mishnah 1. I'd like to dedicate this morning's learning in memory of my mother, Mrs. Shalamas Rabinowitz, Shalamas Bas Reb Yaakov Eliezer, Shbein Aliyah for Neshama.
Amen.
Haboina, one who builds. That's one of the 39 Avos Malachas, one of the 39 primary forms of forbidden work on Shabbos, is Boina, building. And just for the sake of understanding the definition of the malacha of building, they have that here in the notes. The malacha of building is making, repairing, or improving a permanent structure. That all falls under the malacha of boina. Now, another malacha that is not explicitly mentioned in this Mishnah, but is actually there, is called maka b'patish, which is the malacha of striking the final hammer blow. That's a little translation. Maka b'patish, striking with a hammer. That is performing the last step in a process, such as adding the final touch to an object one is making. Okay, so you're making the object, and the final touch is considered maka b'patish. We'll see some examples of that soon. But although maka b'patish is not mentioned, it is being spoken about in the Mishnah. Okay, so the question is, Habayna, one who builds, kama yivne v'yehi chayev. How much does he have to build to be liable? We know that whatever you do on Shabbos to be considered a forbidden labor on Shabbos, it's got to be done in a significant way. So how much is considered significant when it comes to building? Habayna koshu. The answer is, when it comes to building, any amount, any little bit that could be called building, you will be liable for on Shabbos. Liable means a sin offering. Intentionally would be karis. With witnesses and warning would be skila, would be capital punishment of stoning. That all falls under chai of libel. All right. So we say when it comes to building, kol shehu, any amount. So on the bottom here, they explain that since building, even the smallest amount can be significant, such as filling a small hole that spoils the beauty of a mansion, one is liable for any amount of building. And it's possible to have any amount to be considered significant. Where would that be? So it would be the specific example of significance of even a small amount would be like you're filling in a hole for something that even a little hole, ruins what it looks like. Okay, and therefore, once you have that example, then building any amount is going to be liable. All right, now Mishnah continues. Mesates. Mesates means one who chisels a stone into its final shape. For example, he cuts it into a rectangle, smooths it out, or puts any other kind of finishing touch on it. This is the toilada of striking the final hammer blow, because it is the final step in the process of making the stone fit to use. Okay, so although there's no hammer here, it's not the hammer during the final blow. But the point here is that whatever it is, you cut it into a rectangle, you smooth it out, you put any kind of finishing touch on it, that is considered maka b'patish. And the Mishnah is saying, and is going to say, that any amount that you do of that is going to be liable. Now, next example. Maka b'patish of amatzah means one who strikes a stone with a hammer or small axe to break it off from a quarry. So again, at the bottom here from the bottom, they explain, after a stone has been almost entirely cut away from the rock, a single strong blow is used to break it off completely. Since this is the last step in the process of acquiring a stone, it is an example of striking the final hammer blow. That's either done with what they call a patish, a hammer, or with a ma'atzet, a small axe. The next example of a maka b'patish, hakodeach, one who makes a hole to finish the construction of something. The example they give is, for example, if one makes a hole in a wall with a nail and leaves the nail in the hole to be used as a hook, he has performed the malacha of striking the final hammer blow because he thereby completes the making of the hook. So it's not so much making the hole as much as, at least in this example, you're making a hole. It's calling it kaideach because you're making a hole to put something in that hole. And because now you've completed the making of a hook to hang things up on, that's called makeh b'patish. So the Mishnah says in all these examples, kol shehu, if you do any amount of them, chayav, you'll be liable. Which, as I say again on the bottom, he is liable even for making a small cut in a stone, right? Even a tiny little cut in a stone, that's going to be significant in the sense that, now the rectangle is finished, right? Or now it's completely smooth. Or quarrying a pebble, right? Get this little rock, right? And that's the one that you bang off. Or you make a tiny hole for a very small little nail in there to hang something on it. At the end of the day, all these are examples of things that Mishnah says these are all considered significant, and therefore you're liable even for this small amount. Now the Mishnah continues, Za'aklal, this is the rule. Anyone who does a malacha, a forbidden activity on Shabbos, and melachta miskayemes, and his work will last, meaning that in its present form, it's complete. They explain that here. That is, the item is ready to be used as is without any changes or improvements. That is when you're liable. Otherwise, it's not significant enough and can't be a malacha. So even though we just said that even these very small amounts could be considered the malacha of makeh b'patish baina, right? It's got to be something that is lasting in its present form, meaning it's complete. It's actually complete. And once it's actually complete, there's no more change, improvements needed. That is when you already have this. That's when you're going to have, that's when any amount would be liable. Now, the Mishnah concludes with Reb Shimon Gamliel. Reb Shimon Gamliel says the following. Someone who bangs, someone who bangs with a hammer on an anvil while he is working is chayiv, is liable, because this is like improving the thing you're working on. It's like improving your work. That means like this. If let's say you're banging metal into a certain shape, so what do? You take the piece of metal, you put it on an anvil, you got a hammer, and bang. Now, after a couple of bangs, what does the blacksmith do? In order to smooth out the hammer, he bangs on the anvil, right? Because he wants to smooth it out, wants to make sure it remains smooth. So Shimon Gamliel says that every time that you bang that hammer to smooth it out, that is considered misaka malacha. That's considered like I am fixing that, I'm repairing that hammer. Now, I'm going to do it again soon. But Reb Shimon Gamliel seems to be saying that being that I repaired the hammer to continue, that's considered each time the hammer is considered a completed object, and it's makeh b'patish because I repaired it. I put those final touches on it. I didn't make an anvil. I didn't make a hammer, but I finished it up. I improved it. I repaired it. And therefore, that also falls under makeh b'patish. Mishra Gamliel says, so each time you do it, you're going to be chayiv because each time it is like improving the work you're doing on. Makeh b'patish, typically, we're understanding it until now as where, you're putting a final touch on the thing you're working on. Shimon Gamliel is saying it doesn't have to be the thing you're working on. It could even be the fixing the anvil that you're using for your work, not the anvil, fixing the hammer that you're using for your work. But that's for Shimon Gamliel, right? Which means that's his opinion. The Tanna Kama doesn't agree with that opinion. On the bottom, they bring down here that according to the Tanna Kama, the only time it's considered makeh b'patish on the hammer is when it's really the final blow. Meaning, when you're finished banging, right? When you're finished making the thing, it seems like there was still one more bang that the blacksmith would do to smooth out the hammer. Meaning, when he was done using the hammer, he would smooth it out. And means so after he finished working on it, the thing was completed, he banged on the anvil to go ahead and finish smoothing out his hammer. That is where the Tanna Kama says smoothing out the anvil, and the hammer, I keep saying that, smoothing out the hammer is going to be considered makeh b'patish. If it's in the process of doing, you're in the middle of working on something, you do 5 blows, then you bang on the hammer, but you're going to go back again and continue, that is not going to be considered makeh b'patish according to the Tanna Kama. But it is makeh b'patish. It is the final blow. It is that final improvement on the hammer. When after you finished working and you're not going to use the hammer anymore, before you kind of put the hammer away, you bang it in order to smooth it out. That is where banging the hammer is going to be makah b'patish, because that's when it's done. Have a wonderful day.
Thank you, Rabbi.
What'd you say?
They